Hello Malaysians, my name is Professor Dr. Muhammad Tajuddin, and in today's video I would like to talk about, is it Anwar's fault that political Islam has taken over Malaysia? And I will give my understanding of the rise of the Islamic movement in the 1950s, 1960s, to make a case that even though Anwar Ibrahim, if he was not born or he was not around, the Islamic movement would have created a situation of the Malays that we are still at the present within the idea of political Islam. My intention here is to show to mostly non-Muslims who are always looking to Anwar Ibrahim and Parti Islam Malaysia as faulting them for bringing Islam into the life of non-Muslims in this present time, that results in what is called the Islamic conservatism. Now, I will argue and say that this Islamic movement had already started way before Anwar Ibrahim was around, even before Parti Islam Malaysia. But Parti Islam Malaysia is one of the most important anchor into this development of Islam. Now, my argument is that the Malays' development and progression from the dasar ekonomi baru until they have gotten their wealth, they would definitely have turned into conservative Muslims, whether the presence of PAS or the presence of Anwar Ibrahim is here or not. And many of these the non-Muslims do not know the rise of such movement like the IRC, or Islamic Representative Council in the UK, by the Malay students, the rise of Malaysian Islamic Study Group in the United States, again by the Malay students. Then before that, in the early days of the 30s and 40s, is the Kaum Muda by the Malay intellectuals influenced by Egyptian and Pakistani or Indian movement of Islam. After that, we can see that there is the Jamat Tabligh, as well as the rise of the Al-Arqam, which is a very significant force in the Muslim. The present GISBH, or the Global Ikhwan, that is now within problem or controversy, is suspected to be part of the Al-Arqam group that has been terminated by the government in the 90s, I suppose. Now, we will start by looking at the early movement of Islam in the country and trace its development within the aspect of the influence from Egypt as well as India. Now, we'll read in this some of these articles that has been presented. We see here Malay nationalism refers to the nationalism that focus overwhelmingly on the Malay anti-colonial struggle, motivated by the nationalist ideal of creating a Bangsa Melayu. Its central objectives were the advancement and protection of Malayness, Islam, and the Malay language, as well as the Malay royals. Such preoccupation is a direct response to the European colonial presence and the influx of a foreign migrant population in Malaya since the mid-19th century. So it says here that the nationalist movement, meaning the movement to bring about a Merdeka Malaysia, was started by Malays, not started by the Chinese or the Indian, started by the Malays. And who are the Malays? Now, these are the ones that we go into the third paragraph. The rise of Malay nationalism was largely caused by three nationalist factions: the radicals, distinguishable into the Malay left, and the Islamic group, which were both opposed to the conservative elites. The Malay leftists were represented by Kesatuan Melayu Muda, or KMM, formed in 1938 by a group of Malay intelligentsia primarily educated in Sultan Idris Training College, with an ideal of Greater Indonesia. So the first group actually is the Malays looking at the idea of a larger Malay Nusantara. So combining with Indonesia, at one time Malaya could have been part of Indonesia, because Indonesia represents the larger Muslim population. And if we continue here, the Islamists were so in 1945 they reorganized themselves into a political party known as Partai Kebangsaan Melayu Malaya, PKMM. So this was the first group. Second group is the Islamists, who were originally represented by the Kaum Muda, consisted of Middle Eastern educated scholars, especially from Egypt, okay, influenced by social reformist and pan-Islamic thought. And so this is about another group where they were influenced by the idea of a greater Islam, not just a Malaya Islam or an Indonesian Islam, but the global Islam, using Egypt as the springboard. So the first Islamic party was Parti Orang Muslimin Malaya, or Hizbul Muslimin, formed in March 1948, later succeeded by Pan-Malayan Islamic Party, or PAS, in 1951. And the third group was the Conservatives, which consisted of the westernized elites who were bureaucrats and members of royal families that shared a common English education, mostly at the exclusive Malay College, Kuala Kangsar. Now these are the likes of Tun Abdul Razak, Tunku Abdul Rahman, and they are On Jaafar. They are the third group, which eventually were the ones that held power in the early days of Malaysia. But we notice here that the article is mentioning the idea of the second group, which is the Islamists, and they had influence from Egypt. Okay. So now we look at another article, the fundamentals of the Kaum Muda and Kaum Tua movement in Malaysia. The growth of many social movements in Islamic ideology has had a significant impact on the education, administrative, economic and social system of the Malaysian community, especially for the Malay Muslim community. The development of the intellectual and Islamic values in the social system which occurs is the result of pressure from the civil society who want principles and Islamic values in their daily life. Therefore, the result of civil society pressure has begun in the Islamic awakening era in Malaysia around 1960s. So that means Anwar was still a young man. Social movements such as ABIM, GIM, PAS, ARQAM and Jamat Tabligh have appeared in the era in ideology and more Islamic principle. The social movements use Islam as the foundation for the organizational movement. So here, the address fought by the social movement has attracted the community, especially the Malay class Muslim community living in urban and semi-urban areas. The main reason used in the Islamic fight was that they assumed that the government administration was in the meantime to disregard Islamic values in government administrative structure. So here is a situation that many non-Muslims don't understand, that the Islamic movement of this, the ABIM, the ARQAM, the Jamati Tabligh, all this movement were very wary of the westernization of the Malay mind. People like Tunku, people like On Jaafar were looked upon as those who are that would destroy whatever we have of what is called Islamic values and principles. And so the movement had centered the argument against the westernized ideals of UMNO. Now, Kaum Muda and Kaum Tua actually are not, as far as I understand it, groups like ABIM or IKRAM. They're just a bunch of people that has been looped together by scholars to call, these are the so-called progressive thinkers in Islam, and these are the ones that are conservative thinkers. And this is what they call Kaum Muda and Kaum Tua. The historical development of the emergence of the Kaum Muda movement in Malaya would be followed as early as the 20th century. The movement supports the reformist agenda underlying by the influence of pan-Islamism from the Middle East as well as India. So India and Egypt actually are the main influence. Since early 1906, they began to seriously oppose the tyranny of British authorities and Malay aristocracy. This was evidenced through the publication of a magazine entitled Al-Imam as early as the beginning of the 20th century, who was outspoken in criticizing the injustice of both groups, especially against the Malays. The emergence of the Kaum Muda movement later sparked a considerable conflict with the traditionally streamed Kaum Tua. Basically, this happens due to the differences in Islamic idealism brought to face the needs of the time. So this is the beginnings of the Kaum Muda and Kaum Tua. We look at nevertheless, the impact of the clashes between Kaum Muda and Kaum Tua has made many short-term and long-term contributions to the Malays. So the Kaum Muda and Kaum Tua were the ones that has been credited to have the thinking of Islamic reform movement in the very early days of Malaya. The Islamic awakening movement in Malaysia was also influenced by the revival movement from the foreign country, especially the Muslim Brotherhood, the Ikhwanul Muslimin from Egypt, Jamat al-Islami, which headed by people like Al-Arqam from Pakistan, and subsequently the Iranian Revolution in 1979 that really took things into a whole different direction. Intellectual development also took place in the era where the Malays did further their studies at the highest level, either local or international universities. Now, so far what I've been describing is the movement of Kaum Muda influenced by the Ustaz group, meaning those who were studying in Egypt, studying Islamic discipline. They were the ones that initiated it. But then it says here that the movement then took off into the United Kingdom and also in the United States, where Malays who were sent not only then to Egypt but also to study disciplines such as engineering, architecture, all the other disciplines, business studies, and many other studies, began to form the intellectual movement of Islamic ideology. That would be in the UK. So this intellectual development was established a social network between the Islamic awakening movement in Malaysia and overseas from the Middle East. The influence and social networking with the movement in the Middle East had begun since the era of Kaum Muda, and so this was influenced by personalities as Jamaluddin Al-Afghani, Sheikh Muhammad Abduh, and Rashid Ridha. Most of these are the intellectuals outside of Malaysia. The network that existed in the event of social movement where the Malaysian students are pursuing in the Middle East, and also the attendance of agents bringing the ideology of Islamic awakening to Malaysia to create a shared awareness to return to Islamic values, especially through Islamic social movement. So what I'm trying to say here in the first instant is that the movement is beyond what is most people blaming things like, as I said, Anwar Ibrahim or Parti Islam Malaysia. It had its beginnings in the Kaum Muda with the Ustaz coming back from Egypt, and then it expanded into the movement of the Malay students going to UK and US. Anwar Ibrahim was educated locally. He was not educated in the UK, nor was he educated in the United States. I was educated both in the United States and in the UK and in the UK, and I have met these people who formed the Islamic movement. So Anwar was not part of the overseas movement as far as I can understand it. So now we move on to the movement of a student movement in the UK and in the US. Now the second part of this lecture is about the Jamaah IRC, or what is known as the Islamic Representative Council, atau dalam bahasa Melayunya Majlis Syura Muslimin, adalah satu kumpulan dakwah di kalangan para pelajar Malaysia yang ditubuhkan di United Kingdom pada awal 70-an. So IRC was established by the Malay students in the United Kingdom in the 70s. They were active in Brighton, England, and then we can see here the gerakan IRC amat rahsia sifatnya. Sistem yang diamalkan di dalam IRC amat rigid tetapi berdisiplin tinggi, mempunyai manhaj tarbiyah usrah yang tersusun lengkap. So what people should understand here is that the Islamic Representative Council, as far as I understand it, later on had changed its name when they landed in Malaysia to be the Jamaah Islam Malaysia. I was part of the Usrah group that followed the Jamaah Islam Malaysia's movement, even though I was never a member. This was when I was teaching at University Technology Malaysia, where they were looking for young lecturers to train to be the Islamic people, Islamic leaders, of which perhaps they do not think that I qualify because they never invited me to become a member of the Jamaah Islah, probably because of my thoughts being too open and too so-called liberal for them, I guess, because I was reading other religions at the time, and I brought all those ideas into the Usrah discussion, which I think make some of them a bit nervous. So the IRC then turned into JIM, Jamaah Islam Malaysia, and later on what we know here as IKRAM. Interestingly, IKRAM has a body, it has a president and all that, but actually the real leaders are not the ones that are on paper. The real leaders are someone that no one would know, so that in case a crackdown occurs, then the movement can still live, because the ones on paper are not the actual leaders. So that is the Jamaah, what we call the IRC, which later on, as far as I understand it, became the IKRAM movement. So where did it begin? In the United Kingdom by Malay students. Here is the Malaysian Islamic Study Group, of which I was again a part of but never a member of. I was a part of because I participated in the activities of the Malaysian Islamic Study Group of United States and Canada. Emerging from the awareness to enhance Islamic values, identity and understanding among Malaysian students in the United States and Canada, the Malaysian Islamic Group was founded in Peoria, Illinois in the year 1976. The main objective of its establishment is to assist the Malaysian students in walking the path of success. Well, you can read all of that with regard to all the Islamic values and principles that they espoused. But the clear thing here is that IRC was not by Anwar Ibrahim. The Malaysian Islamic Study Group was also not by Anwar Ibrahim. And the Kaum Muda certainly very early on, before Anwar was born. And much of this movement had occurred, as I said, Anwar was nowhere inside. Although MISG is said to have its beginnings from the inspiration of ABIM, then we will look at in this third phase, which is the movement of Islam in Malaysia. So now we come to the Islamic movements or NGOs in Malaysia itself. As I said, the ones before are in the UK as well as in the United States. ABIM was established by Ustaz Wahab Sulaiman. So ABIM, as we know, being associated with Anwar Ibrahim, clearly is stated here. ABIM or Angkatan Belia Islam Malaysia or Malaysian Islamic Youth Movement was established by Ustaz Wahab Sulaiman, not by Anwar Ibrahim. So if we look at the list of president, Anwar Ibrahim is number 2, and then Siddiq Fazil, the father of our present Minister of Education, Muhammad Noor Manuti, who now heads IKRAM, and Ahmad Azam. There are many other leaders after that. ABIM established many schools and also many social activities, and we can see here that it was founded by Muslim students. In particular, the organization promoted Islam through its charity work and education programs aimed at the poor. So ABIM was seen to be apolitical because it sees to look at more of a social movement in Islam to help the Muslims and more importantly to modernize Muslim thought. And this is the thing that most non-Muslims need to understand, that Islam is not just a social welfare force, it is also a spiritual force, but it is also an intellectual force. This is during the time when non-Muslims were building their economy and working to build their prosperity. The Muslims were actually building their intellectual thoughts in Islam and also their spiritual dimension with regard to combining social, educational, as well as professional aspects into their life. Eventually, it will then lead into the political movement, but this is something which many must understand, and that's why Islam is not something ridiculous or something so simplistic as most non-Muslim think. It has very deep-rooted structures in it. We then come to the Al-Arqam. The Al-Arqam movement is a very interesting movement. I saw them rise and I saw them fall because the government terminated them, and they were a very, very strong influence. The nasheed songs and the many of the so-called halal products were all produced, as I understood it, by the Al-Arqam group, which is basically a Sufi group, but it is turned into some sort of a messianic perspective of his leader called Ash'ari or Abu Ya, to say that he is the magical spiritual leader, which is not within the line of the Sunni teaching of Islam practiced in Malaysia. So Al-Arqam is a Malaysian-based Islamic sect founded by Ash'ari Muhammad. Again, no Anwar Ibrahim there. The sect was banned by the Malaysian government in 1994, and the movement known as Darul Arqam, if you look at the origin, started life as a relatively small group that withdrew into its own fairly remote peasant-style self-contained community. Now, they sound as if they live in a kampong, they organize themselves within the idea of making economic progress, and then the income would be distributed, and there is no capitalistic aspect. In terms of marriage, in terms of children, they are totally different than most mainstream Islam. They have their own way. To say that they are wrong, well, that is another matter altogether. But a very interesting economic movement, a very interesting spiritual movement because of their ideas in terms of Sufism. I always buy their newsletters. I find them very, very nice, and also listen to their nasheed. And it is a very, very strong movement that also affected many Malays at one time. And when they threaten a political dominance, then I think I will not shut them down. Finally, we have the Tabligh Jamat. The Tabligh Jamat, Society of Preachers, focuses on exhorting Muslims to be more religiously observant. And it began in India, actually, and then came to Malaysia, and it developed strongly into the Malaysian public, and we can see a lot of people joining that. I also followed the Jamaat Tabligh. What is the Jamaat Tabligh? Well, it is predicated on the idea of asking the Muslims to sacrifice certain days of their lives, 2 weeks, 40 days, to cleanse their soul by doing social work, by doing missionary work to Muslims only. So they don't have any political agenda or converting the whole country into a Islamic state and all that. It's just very basic social, spiritual movement, going from one mosque to another mosque, to invite Muslims to come to the mosque, to invite them to do good, and also to give them the experience of foregoing their present or prosperity in terms of aspect that makes them forget about being spiritual. So if you go on this trip with the brothers, we call them, then you will feel the cleansing of your soul with the brotherhood, and also the sleeping at the mosque, and also the missionary or the da'wah movement to the Muslims becoming something as part of your spiritual psyche. So that is the Tabligh movement, and it has a very, very strong presence in this country. So we now come to the last part, which is the Parti Islam Malaysia. So we see the Parti Islam Malaysia, or Pan Malaysian Islamic Party, is Malaysia's leading Islamic movement, currently led by Abdul Hadi Awang. We see here that the historical rise among reformists' understanding of Islam as a complete system of life could be traced as far back as to the era of Tajdeed, or renewal and Islah, reformation, in the Malay Peninsula circa 1900. So the ones that we were talking about, the Kaum Muda, and then the rise of the other Islamic movement, led then to this only one and a single one political movement, which is called the Parti Islam Malaysia. So PAS was founded on 28 November 1951 as the Persatuan Islam Malaysia at a meeting shortly after it was renamed Persatuan Islam Setanah Melayu. It became known as the Pan-Malaysian Islamic Party. So it was born in the 50s. Burhanuddin Al-Hilmi, a prominent anti-colonialist, steered PAS in a socialist and nationalist direction and set about strengthening the party's internal structure and actually brought PAS into a situation of which he argues for the idea of a more regional aspect of Islam, which includes also Indonesia. And so the Gerakan Melayu Raya is also associated with this Islamic ideology. Now, Burhanuddin Al-Hilmi was an intellectual. It's not like any ordinary ustaz. He was very different than Hadi Awang, who is a bit more restrictive and what we call conservative in terms of his thought. So we see here the rise of the Parti Islam Malaysia, a party which was not popular, and then with the sacking of Anwar Ibrahim, it rose to prominence to the urban Malay elites, and then also into the Barisan Alternative, where it was accepted by the non-Malays to be an alternative at one time. And then after that, it got on to the idea of using Malay Islam by joining forces with UMNO. So with that, I end my discourse on the Islamic movement in Malaysia that has taken a situation where the Malays has many aspects of this movement that has made them to become Islamically aware as we see it now. If they don't join the Al-Arqam, they are part of PAS. If they're not PAS, they are part of ABIM. Not ABIM, they're part of IKRAM. Not IKRAM, they're part of the Tabligh group. And so there are many aspects, and once the other aspect which many are ignoring is that when Malays became older and they are retiring with money, so they now become very Islam oriented to see through their final part of their life, and they form what is the conservative elites, which is part of the institution of Islam, and that also adds on to all this movement that has made Islam where it is now. So with or without Anwar, my idea or my contention is that the Malays will become in this Islamic conservative situation. So the non-Malays need to understand this. There is no way of going out of Islam. There's no way of forgetting and say, oh, we don't want to talk about religion. We must separate religion from politics. I'm sorry, that thing is already gone. Okay, any political party will have to deal with Islam. They like it or not. Now, Sabah and Sarawak says they are free from Islam. My contention is that less than 10 years, they will have the same problems that we are facing at the moment with Islamic conservatism, especially if the demography of Muslims outnumber the other faith. Then you will see that the same thing will happen. So there is no third choice at the moment, and in order for us to move forward, we need to understand which are the Islamic group, the Madani Islam of Anwar Ibrahim or the conservative radical Islam of Parti Islam that we need to support. If we reject both, then the conservative will win. Now, if we think that Anwar is not doing a good job, well, as I said, bring your own champion, but there is none, and there is no way in not talking about Islam. That is the only way we have at the moment for the next 20 years at least. So with that, I hope this clears the air that Anwar Ibrahim is not the culprit in what is called Islamic conservatism. It is a natural process. It is a process that so far has been not made aware to the non-Muslim who are busy with other things and not busy at looking at how the Malays are progressing. The days of Tunku Abdul Rahman Malays are gone, and the days of Mahathir Mohamad's idea of Malayness is also not there anymore. Now we are in the days of Malay Islam, like it or not. So that is the message that I want to impart. We need to navigate carefully and strategically. Thank you.